Megillah. Let's bring up the text. Hold on. Okay. Okay, so we're continuing the Gemara in Megillah. So we're starting a new sugya now. So it says like this. So we said we were talking about that the pasuk in Megillah says Medina, Medina, ir v'ir, and we learned the drasha to say that it's for a drasha to teach us that we're going to go back to a little later about the vicinity that the depending on if a city is a walled city or an unwalled city, when we read the Megillah, the 14th or the 15th, is also in the vicinity of that city. So if you're close by, if you're within 1 mil, we said the distance of about 1,200 meters. So then you fall into or under the municipality, the different rulings of if you are part of a walled city or part of an unwalled city. So when do you celebrate Purim on the 14th or the 15th? Again, the question of the 14th or 15th is not so much only a question of the reading of the Megillah. It's also a question about all the other mitzvahs of Purim, which is the mitzvahs of Mishalach Manos, Sudas Yom Tif, Simcha, etc. Whereas when we talk about in the beginning of the Perek, where we would give up starting from the 11th for the people in the villages, so that's different because the villages would just read the Megillah earlier because they had to have a minyan, however, or to be with someone who knew how to read, but they would still have to celebrate the Yom Tif itself, meaning the Simcha itself, in its proper time, which is usually the 14th. Again, the question is if a small village was walled, what would be the law? Okay. So what is it? The Megillah also says in Esther 9:28 that mishpacha, mishpacha, family and family. So what every family? So what is the pasuk adding? What is it teaching us to repeat every family to celebrate the holiday? It's coming to add something. Lamayasa, what is this coming to add? So Amar Rabbi Yossi Bachanina, Rabbi Yossi the son of Chanina says, Lahavi mishpachas kahuna levia. So here we're going into the question, which comes into in other places of Torah, that this includes also the families of the Kohanim, the priests, and the Levites. That what? That the priests and the Levites, one would think because they have communal responsibility, Hebrews, where again, we're holding on the page is page Gimel Amidala on the bottom. So 3:1 on the bottom. So I would assume it's the second to the third to second to the second or the last page of the art scroll. So he says it's coming to include the Kohanim and the Levites, because the Kohanim and the Levites have communal responsibility, i.e., the service of the temple. So the question is, do the Kohanim and the Levites have to have the obligation of listening to the Megillah? Because it could be their communal responsibilities of taking care of the Beis Hamikdash is more important than them listening to the Megillah. So from this we learn, from the fact that the pasuk says mishpacha mishpacha, the families of the Kohanim, the families of the Levites, that they have to cancel their service in the temple to come and listen to the Megillah. So if they're we're going to see in a second. The question is if there's a conflict, if there's specifically a conflict, because obviously the question is the Megillah takes, let's say, you could read the Megillah. Experts could read the Megillah in 15 minutes, right? So you could read it 20 minutes, and so the 20 minutes is not exactly the whole day that they have to totally cancel their service of the their service of the temple in order to listen to the Megillah. They could do the service of the temple and listen to the Megillah. So we'll get to that in a second. The Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav Yehuda, and then said in the name of Rav that Kohanim ba'avaydasar uleviim biduchanan v'Yisrael b'mamadam kulam mevatlim avaydasam mebayim l'shmai mikra Megillah. So Rabbi Yossi Bachanina learns that the words mishpacha mishpacha is coming to teach us that the Kohen and Levites cancel their service in order to listen to the Megillah reading on Purim. And Rabbi Yehuda Rav also says that the fact that we have that the Kohanim have to do avoda, which is the service. The Leviyim have to stand there on the duchen. The duchen is when there's when the priests are doing the service, the Levites are singing the songs and playing the instruments. And the Yisraels, there's a group of Yisraels that we're going to learn in a second, that David and Samuel established that there should be set Jewish people that are representatives of the community that stand there for the daily sacrifices. We know we have the Talmud sacrifice. The Talmud sacrifice, which is the morning and afternoon sacrifice, which is corresponding to our morning prayer and afternoon prayer, is corresponding to the Talmud. And the Talmud is a representation of all the Jewish people. It means it's not a sacrifice from the temple privately. The temple is doing it on behalf of all the Jewish people. When you give a half shekel before the Purim time, which was around when they collected the half shekel monies, that was a tax that paid for this daily sacrifices. And in every single daily sacrifice, you had your tiny, tiny, tiny percentage of that sacrifice. And when the sacrifice was sacrificed, it helped on your behalf and your family's behalf. So who stood there to represent the Jewish people like a person who has a sacrifice? If you brought a private sacrifice, you stand there and you put your hands on the sacrifice. So David and Shmuel King David and Samuel set that there should be a group, 24 mishmaros, 24 groups of Yisraelim, means non-Kohanim Leviyim, that represent the Jewish people as if they're the representatives of all the Jewish people as standing by the korban. So all those people, means if you're a part of the 24 groups of Yisraelim, or the Leviyim, or the Kohanim, that are part of the service, Kulam Avatim Avidasim, they all cancel their service, Uban Lishma Mikra Megillah, and they have to listen to the Megillah. So no one's excluded from the obligation of listening to the Megillah. Okay, so Rashi says like this: V'Yisrael b'mamadam. What does it mean, the Jewish people who are standing there? So the Rashi explains, like I said, that oimdim al tamidei tzibur b'shas hakravas hakarban. That just like when a person brings a private sacrifice, the person had to stand there. The person who was the sacrifice is being sacrificed on behalf. So if you have a sin sacrifice, a sin offering, or you have a thank you offering, or you give a shlamim, you stand there, and the kohanim does the service on your behalf, and you have to be saimach, put your hands on the sacrifice, right? So too the communal sacrifice, which is every morning, the Talmud. So when the sacrifice was there, they were elected people that stood on behalf of all the Jewish people. Ketanam Masechtas Tainus, as we learn in the Tractate of Tainus, Tishmu lahakriv li b'mayadai, that the pasuk says that you should sacrifice the sacrifice in its proper time. Heich shomer, how do you watch it? Tishmeru means to watch. Who's watching who's protecting, so to say, the sacrifice? Imeni oimid agabav tiknu neviim rishonim chavt ad mishmaris. So because of that, the early prophets, when we say the early prophets, there's different levels of prophets. There's the later prophets, and the early prophets. Neviim rishonim is referring to usually David and Shmuel. That King David and Samuel, David was part of not just the king, he was also part of the Masorah of Torah, and like we learned, and David was also part of the Nevi'im Rishonim. Everything we have is from King David. This is his bracha this week. But he was so instrumental in the system of in the institutions that we have till today. So David and Samuel sat there, and they instituted that there should be the 24 mishmaris, groups of Israelites that stood there on behalf of the Jewish people. I'll call mishmar or mishmar hayimamid v'chulu, that there was a group of people that stood there. So also you have to remember something else, that the Kohanim and the Leviim themselves were divided by David and Shmuel. All the groups of Levites and Kohanim, and then the Yisraelim were all set up by David and Shmuel, by King David and Shmuel. It seemingly looks like that there was groups of Kohanim and Leviim before that, but the groups of the Jewish people kind of were growing into a larger nation, and when they grew at the time of King David, you have to remember the Jewish people at the time of King David and Solomon, that was the height of the Jewish people, at least in the first temple. So things kind of grew to the extent that they had to reorganize it and divided it up into the 24 groups. Basically, each Kohen that was of service, not every Kohen could be of service if you're a blemish or you're too old, but each Kohen of service served. Basically, if you have 52 weeks in a year, and there's 24 groups, so you served about two mishmaris, 2 weeks a year. So that when you talk about a kohen in service in the temple, you weren't always, today you could have, you go to a shul, on a good Shabbos, you could have 20 people kohanim. So imagine in the times of David and Samuel, before the destruction, before all the killings, you can imagine there was thousands and thousands of kohanim. How could all the kohanim serve in the temple? It's not large enough for everyone. So the idea is that you had your set time. And there's different rules when the Kohanim could sometimes join if it wasn't their set time, during the holidays, if you want to do a private sacrifice, you had, like we know, we say, call it today in Israel, Protexia. The Kohanim was able to go into the Beis HaMikdash and do certain things of service. But in general, there was 24 groups, and you belonged to a certain group, and even in the group, you only had really service of one day in that week. Okay. Again, because each group is too large to do all the service all the time. We're actually going to do this Tosfos, because this Tosfos is brought down in Farshim, about the question where the obvious question is that we have over here is, okay, we get it that mishpacha means you have to add, the families have to listen to the Megillah. But why do we use the strong language of mevatlim avedasam, that we cancel the service for Purim? You don't have to cancel the service. You can fit in the Megillah into the service, right? And also, especially like I said, if you have large groups of Kohanim, you can have everything running in its timely manner, and you could listen to the Megillah. Right? So Tosfos says like this: Mevatlin kohanim avidasan l'shmoya mikra Megillah. That the kohanim would cancel the service to listen to the Megillah. Vikasha. So Tosfos asks the question: Amay mevatlin? Why do you have to cancel the service? After they listen to the Megillah, there's plenty of time to still do the sacrifices. So why do you have to cancel it? Because when does the time of service start? By nets. That's why we have the people who daven early in the morning, when it starts to light up in the morning. So he says, no, we don't cancel. Tosfos says, we don't cancel the service. But because when the time starts is in the morning, and then they go listen to the Megillah, even though they're going to do the service afterwards, but because they first take care of their Megillah needs, so that's called canceling. So the Tosfos asks another question. 1 second. Why don't we just let them do the sacrifice of the morning? Okay, let's say in the winter, late winter, early spring Purim, right? So it's usually around February, March, right? So they could wake up in the morning, they could do the carbon, and then after the carbon, they could be finished the carbon by 7 in the morning. Then go listen to the Megillah. Why do they have to cancel? First listen to the Megillah and then do the service. Tosfos answers the Toiv Nikreis imatzibor mishum dahav tafi presum. Here we learn a big thing. First of all, we're going to learn something that's not so understood. Everyone knows we're coming from the holiday of Hanukkah. The holiday of Hanukkah, we know that the emphasis of the Hanukkah is to spread the light. That's why we do public menorah lightings. That's why the menorah has to be lit by the window. So Pesum Nisa, you have to publicize the miracle. We don't find really the expression Pesum Nisa by Purim. We hear Tosfos, and the Gemara is going to bring it down later, says that what is one of the ways of publicizing the miracle is the larger the crowd at the Megillah reading. So if the Kohanim did a private reading, and there was not like they wouldn't have a minyan. There's plenty of Kohanim. You could get 10 Kohanim. So even if there's going to be 10 Kohanim, sorry.
Yeah. I just sent you a thing because my friend can't seem to access the link. So if you or someone could text it to her directly.
I'm teaching now. If someone wants to do that, then it's.
All right. If someone else, yeah.
Okay.
And I'll let me know.
I understand. So he says. So Tosfos says. So why can't they just read themselves? Better to do a communal reading, even though they would have a minyan, because it's more presuming nisa. So the publicizing the miracle is, in this case, in Hanukkah, it's lighting a public menorah lighting, or by the window. In Purim, it's a large crowd to listen to the Megillah. So therefore, Tosfos says they would first listen to the Megillah with the crowd, i.e., everyone, Chevra, this Purim is coming up. Wake up early and don't listen to the Megillah late. We have late Megillah readings. We see that there's an idea that we're even ready to push off the sacrifice, the Talmud, to be a little later, so the Kohanim could listen to the Megillah on time. What's on time mean? In the morning, early in the morning, not 10, 11 o'clock. So we see there's an idea of, first of all, joining a communal a communal setting for Purim, for the Megillah reading, and do it in the morning. Don't push off the Megillah to later time, because that's the Pesum Nisa is in the morning. It's clearly. Otherwise, if it wasn't a big deal, then they would say that they do the reading later. All right, I just want to, before we read Reb Steinsaltz's footnotes, that not everyone agrees with Tosfos over here. Hold on a second. The Ritva doesn't use the Lashon Pesumanisa. The Ritva uses the expression Beroiva Mahadras Melech, which is basically there's a law in general. Beroiv Am Hadras Melech. They have a choice to do something in a small communal gathering or in a larger communal gathering. A person may think, is there any value of having more than 10 people in a minyan? What's the difference if I have 10 people, 10 people, 10 people, or if we get together 30 people? There is a concept of Torah, it's called Roiv Am Hadras Melech. When there's a lot of people together, more than the minimal amount, it beautifies the king. So this is a mitzvah. This applies to all mitzvahs of the Torah. So the Ritva says that their idea why the Kohanim push off the service is not because specifically connected to Megillah, that Megillah has to be Pesur Nisa. And like Tosfos says, what is Pesur Nisa? What does it mean to publicize the miracle specifically to Purim is a communal reading? The Ritva says that falls under the general rule of Reiv HaMadras Melech. That whenever there's an opportunity to be together with a lot of people, better do something with a lot of people because it beautifies the king. So Tosfos learns that it's something unique to Megillah. And the Ritva learns this falls under the general rule of anything in Torah mitzvahs, which is the Reiv HaMadras Melech. The Ritva even says, I don't know what this means, that the Yesh Mefarshim, that those who learn that they wouldn't do the service on Purim at all. I don't know that they didn't do the Talmud. Seems interesting because once they did, even if there was extra time to do it afterwards, because it says like this. I'm just going to read the lashon. This is in a very powerful lashon. It says because of the Yeshua Farshim, those who say the Ritva says the mevatel avodasim lagamrei, they would not do the service of the temple at all on Purim. Afilu hecha the ein shoyz beim lachzul avodasim. Afilu hecha the ein I think shein shoyz beim lachzul mishum dechacham yichaylim laakar davim min Torah. Because the rabbis could uproot something. It means the Torah says Talmud has to be every day. The rabbis could uproot it. And the Ritva says it doesn't make sense. He doesn't agree with that. Okay, we'll see. This is going to continue into other things. There's also also a remez that says Nasa v'nishma and also v'nishma piskam melech. Idea that Torah comes. Okay, let's continue. Let's do Rabbi Steinsaltz's footnotes. Kohanim b'avodasim. What does it mean? The priests in their temple service. Tosfos and the Rashba, in a slightly different manner, explain that the Gemara means to say that the priests may perform the service at a later time than usual. It means if they did it every morning on Nates, right? They would check, if the sun was Meir b'Mizrach by Chevron, right? So we write by the Gemara Yuma. So some write that if for some reason the priests have not yet read the Megillah, and they have insufficient time to both read the Megillah and perform the temple service, they cancel the service and read the Megillah. That's the Turi Evan, which I quoted before. So here he says that if there's no time, but it seems like the Ritva is quoting even if there is time. Others suggest that the members of the priestly watch, whose day it is to serve in the temple, may interrupt their service in order to hear the Megillah, and other priests who have already heard the reading of the Megillah perform the service in their place. So says the Sfat Emes. Means the Ger Rebbe says that it's just mevatel the individual kohen, kind of they make up for each other, but they don't actually cancel the actual service itself. The canceling really is talking about the specific kohen, but not the service. So he quotes over here the Torah that one must be careful not to be negligent about reading the Megillah, for even the priest must interrupt their service in order to hear the reading of the Megillah. So this is quoted from the Torah and the Orei Hayamim, I think. Okay, Hayim. Or Chaim, maybe. Okay, sorry. Torah Or Chaim 687. Okay. The Gemara continues. Tanu Nami Hachi, we learned like this. We learned also to support this idea about reading the Megillah that Kohanim b'avodasim Levi b'techanim Yisrael b'maimadam kulim vatlim avodasim ubayim nishmar mikra Megillah. So now we have a third proof. One was the translation from Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina, I think his name was. And we also brought down Rav Yehuda in the name of Rav, and then we're quoting as well a brisa that says the Kohanim in their service, the Levites, when they do the singing, and the Israel who stand on the carbon, kulam mevatel avodasim, they all nullify, they all cancel their service, and b'ayim lishmar mikra Megillah, to come listen to the Megillah, again, according to either Bereiv HaMadras Melech, or according to Tosfos, because Pesur Nisa. Mikan samchu shal beis Rebbe. from here, from this law, that they're ready to cancel the service of the temple in order, and especially according to the Turi Evan, who was it? The Turi Evan, who said that if you have a choice, you can't do both, either the service in the temple or the Megillah comes first. So mikan samchu shal beis Rabbi shemevatel Talmud Torah b'ayin l'shmai mikra Megillah. So the house of Rabbi, meaning the base Rabbi is not the yeshiva of Rabbi, so to say there's the house of Rabbi. Rabbi is Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, the author of the Mishnah, that they would cancel the studying of Torah to listen to Megillah. So here we're going to go into the question of what's the basis of this, to cancel study of Torah in order to listen to the Megillah. Kal v'chomer me'avoda, because we use a kal v'chomer. Again, kal v'chomer means that if something light could learn from something heavy. In this case, the light is Torah study and the heavy is the avoda. Meaning to say that if avoda, which is, so we say, seemingly more important its time than the constant mitzvah of Talmud Torah, because the mitzvah of Talmud Torah is every free minute you should learn Torah. But avoda is even more, so to say, is chomer. And if you cancel the service in the temple to listen to the Megillah, surely you cancel the study of Torah for that period of time to study the study of the Megillah. What's the obvious question? The obvious question is the Megillah reading itself is studying Torah. So you're not really canceling studying of Torah if you listen to the Megillah. Uma avoda shehi chamura, if avoda, the service of the temple is more stringent, mevatel, nevertheless we cancel it in order to listen to the Megillah. Talmud Torah like Kolshkin, surely the studying of Torah would be canceled in order to listen to the Megillah. So you have to close the yeshivas, and everyone has to go listen to the Megillah. Again, one could say that same idea that you could have kind of some Bachrim learning and some people not learning, some Yungalite learning, and kind of, but the idea that that Tosfos says and the Ritva says either B'sumanisa or Raiva Madras Melech. So again, it's better that everyone should learn to hear the Megillah together, even that means that there's going to be at that point that no one's learning Torah. I mean, in that community. The Gemara is not going to take this so fast. It's not going to take this sitting down, this statement. So Rav Steinzal says like this: the sages in the house of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi relied upon this idea that they should cancel the studying of Torah so they could listen to the Megillah. The later authorities raised the question: isn't reading the Megillah also considered Torah study? Responds of the Beis Ephraim. Some resolve this by suggesting that if a Torah master did not yet read the Megillah, then even if all his disciples already did so, he must interrupt his own Torah study and that of his disciples to go and read the Megillah. So the Rashash says basically that there could be a scenario where there's a teacher. So the students already heard the Megillah, the teacher didn't hear the Megillah. So the question would say, okay, that yes, Megillah is Torah study, but the students are not going to be learning when the teacher is listening to the Megillah. So one would wonder if the teacher has to stop teaching, even at the expense of his students wasting time, right? They're doing spitballs, what have you, so he can listen to the Megillah or she can listen to the Megillah. So therefore, the Rashash says that yes, you cancel studying of teaching even, and even if your students heard the Megillah already, so you yourself could listen to the Megillah. Again, if you learn the Gemara, you could just go fast, but if you're learning a little bit the halachas, the laws that are connected to the Talmud, there's the question of, for instance, does this apply to everyone? Which connects a little bit to the Rashash says. We know that Nikreis Shabbos Rabban, it's brought down when we were kids. Rabbi Kornfeld would tell us, Rabbi Kornfeld from Bellevue, from the Shul, from Shevet Achim, he used to tell us that Chevra, when Mashiach comes, you guys are going to still learn, because it's brought down that the Nikreis Shabbos Rabban, the young children, don't even interrupt their study Torah, even to build the Beis Hamikdash. And even if there's a dead person that needs burial, the young children still learn Torah. So the question is, what about Tinoika Shbeis Rabbim? Not the yeshiva student, but the young children. Do they also stop learning for the reading of the Megillah? So there's the question. The Maramshik brings it down that there's no such thing. That again, he brings the Besuminisa, that the idea of the publicizing of the miracle. One could also argue that we know that the children were very instrumental in the miracle itself. We know that in Hanukkah, the reason why the women also don't work while the lighting of the menorah and that even if they have to cook and other things that they have to make sure that they can pencil in the 30 minutes of sitting by the menorah, is because the women were also part of the miracle, right? Yehudis killed the general, the Greek general. So we know that everyone knows the Medrash, that the children were the ones that broke the decree. It was that Mordechai gathered the Tanoika Shabbat Rabbim, the children, and it was the studying of the Torah that Moshe Rabbeinu was able to argue God to say that to nullify the decree. So the children were surely part of the miracle of Purim to nullify the decree, and the Maram Shik brings down that Pesumi Nisa includes the children, evidently. So for Pesumi Nisa, we see how powerful the publicizing of the miracle. Again, I'm not sure if this falls under the idea of Reiv HaMadrash Melech, but it seems that there's a more of an emphasis in Purim of the Pesumi Nisa of the reading the Megillah than there is the Ritvas Reiv HaMadrash Melech. Again, there's the Pesumei Nisa also is in big crowds. Again, all the halachas. I mean, we're talking about just a quick Gemara. All the halachas go into asking these questions of what are the best ways to organize studying of Torah vis-a-vis the reading of the Megillah. Okay, we'll leave the details for another time. The Gemara now challenges a question on the understanding of the house of Rebbe. That who says? Means what did the house of Rebbe say? The house of Rebbe said, meaning the Torah study in the house of Rebbe, they said that if we cancel the service of the temple in order to read the Megillah, surely we cancel the studying of Torah. But who says? Maybe canceling the service is lenient. It's not more strict. That's the Gemara challenge. Do you want to say that the service of the temple is more strict than studying of Torah? Okay, this is the Gemara we learned. For all those who have a memory, Shuki's not with us, but the Gemara, if you remember, we learned in Sanhedrin the story of Yehoshua, right? When Joshua went in to conquer Jericho, and then he went to conquer Ai, is when he was approached by the angel of God, right? And he says, "Are you with us or against us?" Right? So we learned the whole Gemara that what Yeshua did, what the angel was coming to, so to say, to scold Yeshua, Joshua, was that he stopped learning Torah because at night they couldn't fight. There's no reason not to study Torah at night. So we see we learn that it says in the Joshua that when Joshua was in Jericho after the battle of, I believe it's after the battle of Jericho, during the battle of Ai, we're going to learn the Mefarshim say, Tosfos says it kind of bundles together the psukim, the verses. That Joshua was standing by Jericho around the battle of Jericho, and he saw a man standing before him, and he bowed to him. Okay, now the Gemara goes off on a side note. How did he bow? This is a repeat of the Gemara we learned in Sanhedrin. How did he bow to the person? Rabbi Yeshua, the son of Levi, says, you're not allowed to greet a person, even your colleague, at night, meaning in the dark. Chashin and Shemashaidu, maybe it's a demon who's coming in, and dressing up. The demons we know roam at night. And one of the things of a demon is that a demon could take on a persona. And maybe, it's an identity theft. And it's really a shade. It's a demon. It's not really a friend. And you have to be careful to interact with a demon. Shani Hasim the Amrlei Keni Tzvasham. So it says no, different, because the shade, the person who he was standing in front of said, "No, I'm a captain of the host of lords." It means I'm an angel. Obvious question is maybe he's lying, right? So just because he said he's an angel of God, maybe he's not an angel of God. We'll see what the Gemara asked that. So Rashi says, how did he bow? That says in the verse that Joshua bowed to the person who stood in front of him. How could he bow in front of this person who stood in front of him? Maybe it's a demon. I just want to say, we're not going to, in general, I want to calm everyone down. We don't plan on learning all the Tosfos of the Gemara Megillah, because Tosfos can sometimes be difficult, but in a case where it's easy and it's an easy reading and it's adding commentary, then of course we'll learn the Tosfos as well. So here it says, I just want to give everyone a layout of the Talmud, right? So if you have your classic Vilna Talmud, I don't know if you could see, so this is the original text, then you have the right and the left. So the right is the Rashi translation, and the left is the Tosfos. The house of Tosfos was generally the descendants of Rashi. These are the French rabbis in the time of the years of 1100, 1200 was the house of Tosfos, which was out of France. Rashi was also in France. So Rashi gives the basic commentary on the Talmud. The Tosfos is more the expanded commentary. The house of Tosfos, the Rabbeinu Tam, the Rashbam, a lot of the Reed, these are Tosfos Reed. The house of Tosfos was a yeshiva. But a lot of the main personalities of the house of Tosfos were the descendants of Rashi. There are even Bali Tosfos that lived in London, in England. So that was the Ashkenazi yeshiva of the time. So they were called the Bali Tosfos. It's a yeshiva. So the Chashina and Shemashaydu, so the Tosfos says, maybe you have to be concerned that if you meet someone at night, you have to be careful to greet that person because maybe it's a demon. So the Riva, which is one of the Bali Tosfos, says, this is not talking about if you meet someone on the street. Means if you meet someone outside the city, because we know that over a period of time, Reb Chanina Mendoza kicked them out of the cities. There was Reb Chanina Mendoza, the great Reb Chanina Mendoza, the big tzaddik who was very powerful. He was like a servant to God. He kind of negotiated with the demons. He didn't let them roam all the time. And then the Baal Shem Tov kind of pushed them out further. So the demons, it's only outside the city. And that's where that means once you interact with a demon, kind of that's, then they lock in on you, they could cause nezek. A shade is called a mazik. They're here to cause damage. Sometimes King Solomon used them for benefit, but most of the times even then it caused him damage. So according to the Medrash, he kicked, he took on the persona of King Solomon for a long time, for many years. So if you meet them outside the city, then they're called mazikin. If you're going beside, if you go out to the field B'layla at night, be careful who you greet because maybe that person's a demon. Joshua at that time was outside the camp. He was on the siege of Jericho, outside the camp because he was with the army. So then he has to be careful who he meets. But if you're in a place where people are found, not in isolated forests or fields, so then it's not a problem to greet people. We know the law is that even at night you can meet someone who tells you, please write a divorce for my wife. Maybe it's not a real person. Maybe it's just a demon. You can't listen to anyone at night. So it's obviously not talking about in a regular setting. It's talking about outside communal space. Okay, that's the laws of Gittin. We'll skip that. But the idea is, Tosfos teaches us that when do you have to be careful to greet someone is when you're in the fields, not in public places. But if you're in the city, in a public street, then to greet someone at night you don't have to be so scared about the meeting a demon. Again, once upon a time, demons was a common thing. It's less common. Again, Reb Chanina Mendoza only let them roam. I think on, when was it? Tuesday nights? Wednesday nights? He gave them 1 night or 2 nights a week to roam and, to do their damage a few times a week. So Rashi offers a simple proof that this took place at night from the fact that Joshua did not recognize the figure coming toward him. And so apparently it must have been dark. I'm not sure which Rashi he means. Oh, it's the Rashi in Sanhedrin. Sorry. Okay. So now the Gemara asked the obvious question. V'dilma mishakre. Maybe this person was a demon and said he's an angel of God. So they said, no, even the demons have rules. Gimre, it's an established teaching. They would never utter the name of God in vain. So they would never say, Ani sar tzvas Hashem, that I must, if they wouldn't lie using God's name. Even a demon wouldn't lie using God's name. So therefore, if he said, I'm an angel of God, then Joshua was able to believe them. Okay, so this is a side note. So what happens? So what did the angel tell Joshua? Again, this is all what we learned in Sanhedrin. Because of the war, they missed the evening sacrifice. Right? So they missed the evening sacrifice at night because of the war. So he was upset. Why did you miss the evening sacrifice? And on top of that, he says that and now after the fighting at night means the evening sacrifice is in the evening. Now it's night, there's no more fighting, it's dark. You're just relaxing, you're not learning Torah. So you did 2 sins. One was that you didn't do the sacrifice, and the second one was that you're not learning Torah. So which one are you coming to? Which one really triggered this meeting? Was it that we didn't do the sacrifice, or that we didn't learn Torah? So Amrlai Atabasi, now I'm coming because you didn't learn Torah. So what do we see from here? That Torah is more strict than the service of the temple. It means Joshua didn't learn Torah, and he didn't sacrifice the evening sacrifice because of the war. But still, the angel was upset because, you should have found time to do the sacrifice, and you definitely should have been learning when you were resting. So what do we see from here? That he only came when he didn't learn Torah. Means to say that learning Torah is more strict than the service in the temple. So how does the house of Rebbe know that one cancels study of Torah to learn Megillah because we cancel the service in the temple to hear Megillah? Maybe the service in the temple, which is more lenient, you cancel for the Megillah, but Torah, which is more strict, you learn and you don't learn and you don't go and you don't cancel the Torah study for the Megillah. So, and what did Joshua do? So Joshua right away realized that he has to start learning Torah. So he went into the Emek, into the depths, to the valley, like the depth of the Torah study. So on Rabbi Yochanan, we're going to hold on Rabbi Yochanan's statement in a second. We're first going to do Rashi. Rashi says, Emesh bitaltem. So the angel says to Joshua, B'tshuva sheshiva ata basi anu b'tshuva sheshiva ata basi. The fact that the angel tells Joshua that although there was two things that you guys did wrong. One was that Joshua didn't do the evening sacrifice. And number two is you didn't learn Torah. But he says, I came now. On Elamedim, from this we learned, Tchilas, Divrei HaMalach HaShimon B'shnei Dvarim. So the fact that, so first thing Rashi is establishing, how do we know that he came for two things? So when the fact that he says, the Atabasi means, now I'm coming versus another time. Emesh Kleimar, Kisheheriv HaYoim, when it was the evening, Hayilachem Lahachriv Talmud, you should have done the evening sacrifice. Talmud HaErev, Betaltem I say, and you didn't do it. V'nishteheyem b'marav ha'ir, and you stayed in the west part of the city Chinam for no reason. But when it's getting dark, you shouldn't have stayed in the city. Now that it's totally dark, you should have been studying Torah. You're not fighting at night. So there's two things. One thing is in the evening you should have stopped. You should have left the west part of the city and done the evening sacrifice. So the question is, why didn't they do the evening sacrifice? So the answer means why didn't they do it? Again, like the same question about the Megillah. Just because there's a war going on in Jericho, the priests could do the evening sacrifice. So one of the answers is that we know Joshua took the ark with him. By taking the ark with him to fight, kind of would disrupt the setting of the sacrifice. And also, who's carrying the ark? The Kohanim, the priests. You have to remember the time of Joshua, there wasn't thousands of Kohanim. The times of Joshua, there was maybe 10, 15 priests, right? In the time that Joshua was, we only find that there was Aaron as the priest, and he passed away. So you have Elazar was then the high priest, the son of Aaron. Two of the brothers died, so he has another brother, Itamar. You have Pinchas, the son of Elazar. Okay, let's say they had other children, but how many children did they have already? We're not talking about hundreds of children, maybe 20, 30 Kohanim. So they could have all been at the war front. There was no Kohanim, there was no priest to do the evening sacrifice. So he says, but also you didn't learn Torah. So he says, I'm coming on the sin of now, meaning that you didn't learn Torah. I didn't come to scold you yet on the sin of the lack of sacrifice. So Rashi says that when did he start learning Torah? It's kind of confusing because they had the ark in Jericho. This is already the second war in Ai. So right afterwards, on the next siege in the city of Ai, we know that's why also because they didn't learn Torah, they lost. That's when there was loss of soldiers, although the loss of soldiers was also connected to Achan taking from the spoils of Jericho. But basically, Joshua learned that he has to learn at night, that even if you're fighting by day, that doesn't exempt you from learning Torah at night. I'm just going to learn a little bit of this Tosfos, because again, Tosfos addresses the question that I asked of why didn't they do the evening sacrifice? So, Emish betaltim tamach ben abayim. Last night you didn't do the evening sacrifice. Kasha, my batlu. Why didn't they do this evening sacrifice? All Yisrael, all the Jewish people who were fighting of age couldn't study Torah because they were on the siege of the city. So that's why they didn't study Torah, even though they weren't actually fighting. They're just laying siege. So they could have put down their guns and their swords and their bows and arrows and taken out their Devar Malchus and their pocket Talmud and done Daf Yomi. Why this doesn't exempt you just because you're in the middle of fighting. Those beautiful pictures of the soldiers in Gaza studying Torah. But that has nothing to do with the Kohanim, that they weren't part of the war effort. Why weren't they sacrificing? Shlomo Satosis says, they had the ark with them, like it says in Perek in Eruvin. Who's carrying the ark? The Kohanim. And again, there wasn't that many Kohanim. Basi dechsiv Torah tivulanu im letzarenu oy b'shvil hakarbon shemagi aleinu mitzarenu. So he said shemaginim aleinu mitzarenu. So how do we know that those were the two sins that the angel came? So Tosfos teaches us a beautiful thing. That what did Joshua say to the angel? Ha'im, he says, are you? What was the lashon he says? Are you halanu, you for us, or litzarenu, for our enemies? So the word lanu we know is in the pasuk that says Torah tziva lanu. So from the word lanu we could learn, it hints us, it's a remez, it's the concept of remez. It hints us that the idea of lanu was about Torah tziva lanu. And litzarenu, are you our adversary, means the korban that's protecting us from our enemies. And there's another thing he says, Vayal Yeshua b'laylahu, okay, he says, again, what Tosfos says, Rashi says that the Pesukim gathered together. I saw another translation that says that Tsarenu means not just not the word Sarah. Those who are familiar with the lashon Sarah doesn't just mean the word we use Sarah like Tsaris, things are bad. But also when in those days when they married two women, if a person married two women, so the two women that were to each other they were called a Sarah. Why? Because they obviously didn't get along. If you're married to two women, they're not going to get along. So they were called a tzara. And there's a halachics about if two women are allowed to testify for each other, for instance, to say things, because the thinking is that a woman will even hurt her own situation to hurt her, her competition. So it's called the tzara. So also the tzara is referring to the nations, because they like to make tzaras for the Jewish people. But also the karbanis protected the nations. They say that if the nations of the world knew that the temple was actually not just protecting the Jews, but protecting all mankind, then not only wouldn't have they destroyed the temple, they would have guarded the temple. So the Tzarenu means not just the Karbanis, it means the Karbanis, because the Karbanis protect also the nations. Okay, let's just do Rabbi Steinsaltz. I think we have to finish a few minutes early because I have to go to a Shiva call. So the Rabbi Steinsaltz says, Vitaltim Tamid Sheben Arbaim. One thing was, the first sin was that when Joshua was sieging Jericho or Ai, they didn't do the evening sacrifice. See Tosfos for an explanation as to why the offering were not brought. Again, because the Kohanim took the ark. Some suggest that owing to the journey, they did not have time to erect the tabernacle, and so they weren't able to bring the offering. So Rabbeinu Chananel and the Aruch says that it wasn't that the Kohanim took the ark, but that they couldn't put up the tabernacle because they were on the move. Okay. I'm not going to get into that argument. That's between Rabbeinu Chananel and Tosfos. Joshua lodged that night. Tosfos note that the Gemara joins together two different verses. Okay, we're going to skip this. It's not. This is just playing on the verses. Let's go a little further to see what Rabbi Yochanan says to finish this little sugya here. Rabbi Yochanan says, "Melamed shalon ba'oimka shalalacha." The word oimek means that Joshua didn't just do a casual study. They went into the depth of the law. Rav Shmuel bar Unya, Rav Shmuel the son of Unya says, from this we learn, which is based on the question, from this we learn that studying of Torah is even greater than the sacrifice because the angel only comes now. Means if the angel would have come before, so then we could say that the angel, that the not sacrificing was a worse crime or sin. But the fact that he only came on the sin of not studying Torah, we see from this that the studying of Torah is more important than the sacrifice. So back to the original question: how did the house of Rebbe not know to learn that from this that you could cancel Torah study for the sake of of hearing the Megillah. Here is it's an amazing Tosfos. Tosfos says like this. I'm just going to read you the first part of Tosfos is a Girsa question. There is an opinion that says that the reason why he studied Torah, why didn't the soldiers go home to be with their wives and have relationships, which is a mitzvah, because the system wasn't set up, the ark wasn't in its place, so it's not appropriate to have marital relationships when the ark isn't in its place. But the Tosfos doesn't add to that. But there are those who say that why was Joshua punished? Al shebitul Yisrael mipiri v'ribya. Yishleim demashin shlei hoya loy ben zacher hoya al shebatul Yisrael mitach shamida mida connected mida al vashar einish boiloi al bitul Torah. There's those who hold the opinion that evidently Joshua didn't have any sons. This is the first that I'm hearing of that. Why didn't he merit to have sons? But because in the fighting he didn't make sure to have a system for the husbands to go back and be with their wives and to have relations. And because the mitzvah of relationship is so important, and Joshua didn't take care that their husbands could go home to be with their wives, he was punished not to have any sons. And the other son was because they didn't study. The other sin was because they didn't study Torah. Reb Shmuel Bar Unya says that it was necessary to add this for, if not, we might have thought that the angel came because they had transgressed 2 transgressions, and not because the mitzvah of Torah study is more important than the Talmud service. From this we see that Reb Shmuel Bar Unya says that Torah study is greater than the sacrifice. He only came for the Torah study. So the Gemara answers the question like Kasha hadirabim v'hada yachid, that when is the Torah study greater than the sacrifices if it's a communal study? Sorry. Yes, by the communal study. But of an individual, it's not greater than the service. And if the individual is not greater than the service, then the individual should cancel his studying of Torah and go listen to the Megillah. All the Jewish people should have been learning. So see, Rabbi Steinzel says, Rashi explains that this is referring to Torah study of the entire Jewish people. He is compelled to explain it in this manner because the case of the sages of the house of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi is also dealing with Torah study of many people, yet the Gemara does not consider them to be the entire community. This must be due to the fact that in relation to all of Israel, they were considered as individuals. Means the Rehei Dudamim says that even though the house of Rabbi were a group of people, it could have been a minyan. But again, the idea of Roivam Hadrus Melech and the idea of Pesur Menissa, they're not all the Jewish people. All the Jewish people learning Torah will be greater than service, but just a group of the house of Rabbi, they're not greater than the service, and therefore they would for sure have to cancel the studying of Torah. If we cancel a communal sacrifice for studying for the Megillah, surely then a group of some individuals would have to close their Talmuds and go listen to the reading of the Megillah. Okay, let's stop over here. I have to go to a Shiva. Thank you all for joining. Be'ezus Hashem. We'll continue next week. I mean, I'm gonna try to pick up pace. Shuki had this idea that we would be finished by Purim, Maseches Megillah, but that's obviously not possible. But we'll try to pick up maybe a little pace starting from next week, if we're going a little too slow. All right, Laila Tov, everyone, take care.